And there's also another really good scheme as well, the Access Card scheme, which can kind of be really helpful, and carers can kind of apply for those. And it can give you kind of things like free carer spaces and things like queue jumps and access to quieter spaces if you need it. Because sometimes sensory overwhelm can be a real thing for people living with dementia.
Okay, hello and welcome to our latest Dementia Adventure session. And today we are going to be looking at change and travel. So you just caught Karen and I talking about our holidays this year. We will be sharing practical advice for navigation changes and routine during those summer holidays, but particularly looking at travel and maintaining comfort and safety for the person you're supporting living with dementia. So before we get into that, Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's lovely to have you with us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Karen. I work for Dementia Adventure and I have done for the past 2 years. My role is Adventures Coordinator. So what that means is that I plan, coordinate 5 of the DA holidays. And what it involves is basically lots of chatting with the clients to ascertain what their needs are, booking the itineraries. Yeah, so just making sure that we have everything in place to make the holidays amazing for people. Yeah.
And I think you're being incredibly modest because you do an amazing job of making sure everybody has a wonderful time, that everything runs very smoothly. And I know when I lead on some of our holidays, you're always in the background sorting everything out. So you've got a real good understanding of actually speaking with those clients about that change and what that can look like. So we're really going to be unpicking that. I'm going to be picking your brains throughout today's session.
Sure.
Just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping to do. So please do ask any questions or leave comments in the chat function. If we don't get to them, we will come back to them after today's session, I promise. But we will aim to answer as many of those as we can. And as always, just a quick shout out to Right at Home for sponsoring our Unpacking Dementia series. It's a brilliant partnership we've got with them. And we've had some real fun this month running our picnics with them. So let's get started. And I think one of the questions we hear a lot is, why is it that travel is so unsettling for someone living with dementia? What really causes those concerns?
I think primarily it is the needs of the people living with dementia and that change in routine. And kind of, I think a lot of carers can be a little bit worried about when they're outside of their environment, which they have set up in a structured way to meet the needs of the person living with dementia. How are they going to be able to replicate that in a new and unfamiliar place where, the environment isn't the same? So that can raise anxiety for
Yeah.
carers about whether or not it is kind of safe and possible to take people away.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. And I think it's something that I see quite a lot when I'm on the holidays as well, is that idea of doing something differently. And I think both you and I are aware of the benefits of doing that and, why that can be so important. But is there tips you've got around how people can support somebody to maybe understand where they're going to be going, or, what that change of routine might look like? Is there things you've got that you've seen really work well across the time with us?
Yeah, so sometimes people pick a venue or a place to go on holiday that is familiar to them, that might have some kind of memory hooks for people. So that might minimize kind of anxiety in the person living with dementia, and also give them the opportunity to connect with memories, from their life. So has
Yeah,
some kind of opportunity for reminiscence, which can be really, really helpful. And as well, I think sometimes just talking through what the needs are of the person living with dementia, what kind of dietary needs there are, what kind of mobility needs, and kind of,
mm,
I think, reassuring people about the tools and the ways in which we can support them on that holiday in
yeah,
that environment. And it's really important to kind of get to know the person living with dementia and what kind of particular things they can find challenging and what strategies there are for kind of
absolutely.
overcoming them. So I think what's really key is figuring out like what a person's emotional anchors are. So, what helps a person to feel safe when they're a little bit unsettled. So what could that
Yeah.
be? Is it the person that's going with them? Is it looking at photo albums? Is it listening to music? Is it the way that someone communicates and interacts with them? So, quite often we will spend a lot of time on the phone, kind of going through the person's needs in a lot of detail. And through that, we can really reassure carers about the ways in which we can map out how to meet people's needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really key to understand as well, like maybe somebody isn't going away with an organisation such as ourselves, but thinking about, I mean, often in the past, we used to have very busy holidays. We often feel like we've got to plan things. And actually, I think the old saying, a change is as good as a rest, really does apply here. So, even if it is some days we're not doing huge, big outings, that we are staying quite local or maybe having some downtime, I think
Mm.
understanding that's absolutely key for somebody living with dementia is important as well, isn't it? Because I know when I lead on holidays, you do put an awful lot of downtime in for us. We're busy, but we're kind of slowly busy as well.
Definitely. And I think that can be a real worry because obviously, when you look at our holiday itineraries, they might look busy if someone's not used to a high level of activity. But I always reassure people, we really pace, we really plod, we really
Yeah,
take things slow. We only go as fast as the slowest person that we kind of have with us. And we do factor in a lot of rest.
yeah,
Is really, really
absolutely.
important. Yeah.
And I think that's a learning tool that carers can take where, away with themselves, actually think about the pace of what you're doing. Forward planning, having leaflets around places that you're going to think about visiting and actually seeing if those
Mm.
places are of interest, because ultimately I think lifting mood and motivation when maybe that person is feeling a little bit unsettled can be really key. But something as simple as, a little bit of information about that place with some, photographs on it can be really, really helpful. It just helps that person process and understand, I find.
Definitely. So ahead of the holiday, we kind of share a visual itinerary which has like pictures, of where we'll be
Yeah,
going. And quite often carers will put that up on the wall so that they can go through that with a person living with dementia, just to kind of, help them to kind of understand what their holiday is going to look like. And on the holiday as well, we do like a visual guide to the holiday, which the people living with
amazing.
dementia can access throughout the holiday just to see what they're doing day by day. And we also include a visual timetable of the day as well, what we're doing at different sections of the day, just to kind of enable people when maybe, because sometimes holidays do look a little bit out of routine, then
Mm.
and they are very different. It's just to anchor the person so they know what to expect, and that can help
Absolutely. And I
minimize
think any of us can do
anxiety.
that, can't we, to support
Yeah,
somebody? I've got a
definitely.
question actually from Dale, and he's asking, are travel insurance and medical support different while on holiday with somebody with dementia? And it's a challenging one, isn't it? Because I think we, certainly from a company point of view, we would always be recommending somebody had travel insurance, but equally, other comorbidities could feed into that. So my advice would generally be, do some research on that, speak to lots of different companies. We certainly wouldn't be recommending particular companies, but is that what you found as well, that it can really, really vary for
It
people?
does vary. And, we always advise people to go on the Money Helper website because that gives a lot of advice and guidance around kind of getting travel insurance if someone's got a pre-existing medical condition. And
Good, yeah.
that can kind of be really helpful. But we do really advise that people take that out, obviously
It's
because of the,
safety and security, isn't it?
definitely,
Absolutely.
definitely.
So thinking about just planning ahead for getting there, because I think often traveling somewhere new and somewhere exciting also comes with its challenges, doesn't it? So have you got any tips for that travel, like just getting to that place
Yes.
beforehand?
So, this can be a really, really big thing. So, I think obviously, depending on the length of the journey, things like making sure that the person has things that will keep them stimulated and occupied on the journey. So, if they like doing puzzle books, if they like looking on their iPad, those kind of things.
Mm.
It might be that you might need additional support to travel. So, if you're getting the train, booking things like passenger assistance, where the rail companies can provide a person, to help you with getting on and off of trains and things like that. Yeah, and just kind of factoring in rests and ensuring, obviously, because it can be a bit stressful traveling, just making sure that those basic needs are met, that you've kind of packed, your food and your water, and you've got all those things covered. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think additional breaks, isn't it? Not being afraid to take those additional breaks and almost preempting, the journey is going to be longer than it once was,
Mm,
definitely. I think ultimately, when we're talking about holidays, keeping things flexible can be key.
yeah,
So, it's really good to have an idea of what you'd like to do, sort of, timings of when you'd like to arrive and leave, etc. But I think, like everything dementia, actually having that flexibility and that understanding that may change on the day and that may change throughout the holiday is important. And the reason I think I highlight that is because I think as carers, we often feel very like we've got to make this work. We've got to follow this process. Whereas actually, the idea of a holiday is for carers to have a break as well. So I know when people are away with us, we really ensure that both that person living with dementia, but actually that person caring for them has that downtime, has that break. Would you
totally.
agree?
Totally. And I think yeah, just promoting that kind of sense of being quite flexible and adaptable is really, really important. And it doesn't matter, sometimes things pop up and we might need to change and kind of tweak plans, and that's fine. That
Yeah,
is part of living with dementia. But it's so important. And I think that's a really big part of what we do. It's kind of taking that mental load off of the carers, and kind of
yeah.
taking care of those day to day kind of things for people so that they can just enjoy, they can just relax and reconnect with their partner. Yeah,
Definitely, yeah. I can see Tess has popped in the chat, and I think she makes an incredibly valid point. So she shared with us that her husband refuses to entertain the idea of going on a holiday now, despite going to Devon last year and really enjoyed it. And she feels that's a confidence issue. And I think that's a really valid point. We know dementia is progressive, and often there's that recognition that things become harder, things become more challenging. So I think all of us, if we're honest, like our routines, don't we? We like, doing what we do at the times we do it in our safe spaces. But would you say there's particular benefits to going away? Have you seen that on the holidays that you've organised?
definitely. And I think it's really, really common. Quite often we will have people call up and there'll be a lot of anxieties and a lot of worries about if it's possible to come away and what
Mhm.
if this happens and what if that happens, and quite often we just have to reassure carers, and kind of say that, we make lots of plans, and so that we can support and we understand and we can support your needs.
Mm.
So I would kind of say that there's just been countless examples of the positive impact of the holidays, since I've been
Yeah.
doing this job. And people who were so incredibly worried about how the holiday would go, and then, kind of just seeing throughout the week, them just relaxing into it and just having, really positive experiences, being out of their comfort zone and realizing what's possible is a really, really powerful thing. And I think really does build confidence. And, just numerous times kind of connecting with people after the holiday, they share how transformative that is beyond the holiday, because
Mhm.
I think sometimes, your life and your world can become very small when you're living with
Okay.
dementia. And it's about what's not possible because of the challenges. And I think sometimes, going into the safe cocoon of home and your familiar surroundings. But when you kind of see that actually you can still go away on holiday and you can have a
Yeah.
really joyful time, and it really does build confidence. Yeah.
Would you say things like familiar songs and like maybe familiar scents, like perfumes and stuff, it's things from home, that kind of thing? Do you think that really makes a huge difference when going away as well for people?
Definitely, because I think, where someone is outside of their typical day-to-day environment, I think again, just having those really safe, familiar things that you can kind of bring along,
Mm.
and use and utilize is kind of really important emotional anchors, basically. So,
Yeah.
someone might have a kind of photo album that they really like looking through. Someone might be really, really into listening to the Beatles, or, kind of a particular type of music, or,
Yeah.
they really like carrying around a particular purse, or, yeah, sometimes scents are really powerful, and evocative. And sometimes you see that, when you're visiting places like gardens, and someone kind of smells like a certain flower in bloom and it
Mm.
kind of evokes a particular memory. So yeah, it's incredibly important. Yeah, as a
Yeah.
way to kind of enhance mood, but also as an emotional anchor. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think it's probably key to mention at this point that actually there is routines we can keep the same. For example, we can keep meal times similar to home. We can keep bedtimes similar to home. So although we might be doing something very different during the day, actually some of those key parts of that daily routine can also be kept as they were, and we can fluctuate that depending on somebody's ability. Maybe if they're on their own, if they're holidaying with us, then obviously we have those visual timetables to support that. But I
Mm.
think it's that reassurance, really, isn't it? That, to any carers watching, that travel absolutely is still possible, but it does just take some planning sometimes and not to be afraid to get others to support with that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Lovely. Okie dokie. Oh, Waltrud has shared a lovely tip for us that wearing the sunflower lanyards on trains or at airports can give you instant access to support. And I think that's something really to pick up. That the sunflower lanyards are then that recognition that actually I am living with a condition and I might need a little bit of additional help and understanding. And it's now very widely recognised, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. They're really, really helpful. And there's also another really good scheme as well, the Access Card scheme, which can kind of be really helpful and carers can kind of apply for those. And it can give you kind of things like free carer spaces and things like queue jumps and access to quieter spaces if you need it. Because sometimes sensory overwhelm can be a real thing for people living with dementia. And if you're visiting kind of a new venue and it might be noisy and busy, that can be really, really challenging. So the access card is
Okay.
also another way of
And
kind of
how do people find that? That's not something I've come across before. Can
yeah,
people access that through local council or?
yeah. So you can basically go onto the Nimbus. It's Nimbus are the organisation that kind of oversee that, and you can
Okay.
apply on their website. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what we'll do is we'll make sure those details go into the chat at some point after the session. I've got Sal who's asked, my dad really struggles with long journeys. We have to keep stopping for toilet breaks. And often he doesn't need the toilet, but we haven't tried the train yet. Is that recommended? So I think the train could be a really, really helpful, but it's about having support on there. What do you think,
Yeah,
Karen?
definitely. And I think, yeah, because I suppose it is a little bit of a kind of, you don't know what's going to happen, who's going to be around, if the train's going to turn up, all of those kind of things,
Hmm.
if you're going to find a seat. But again, it's about that forward planning. So, you can book passenger assistance, but when you book the ticket, you can kind of go on to the passenger assistance website and make the train company aware that there are some additional needs, so then they can make sure that you have a seat and that you also have support kind of when it comes to getting on and off of the train. If you're
Yeah.
worried about things like managing the needs of the person living with dementia while struggling with luggage and or a wheelchair, they will have that sorted. They might bring along like a little golf buggy so they can take you to a different platform. So there are ways around it. And also at Dementia
Absolutely.
Adventure, we do offer something called a travel buddy scheme if you travel with us, where one of our really highly trained volunteers can travel on the train with you just to provide that kind of ongoing support throughout the journey. Yeah.
Lovely. So is there somebody that people could talk to before booking a supported holiday? What would that process be?
So yeah, we always advise that people give us a call because yeah, a lot of the time we can alleviate a lot of those worries that people might have that are kind of barriers.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we also really like to know, kind of the needs of the person living with dementia. So absolutely, there's myself, my fantastic colleague Julie and Catherine. We all work in the adventures team, and you can just give us a call. We can book you on, and kind of give you all the information that you need, talk you through how the holidays work and what support we can offer. Yeah.
Lovely. And I think really it's kind of key to remember when we're thinking about a holiday or even a big day out, it's not necessarily about ticking off those tourist spots now. I think sometimes in life we feel that's what we should be doing. But actually, the benefit comes from being together, just enjoying the
Mm,
outdoors and creating those moments together. I know on our
mm.
holidays, we often, we do every holiday, we put together a photo album. And actually, I've supported people who've come back to us and seen the level of enjoyment looking through those photo albums, reminiscing where they were, where there is. So, Bella has asked actually, is there a website that lists dementia friendly accommodation around the UK?
Mm. I actually don't know. I'm not
I
sure. I'm not
don't.
sure about that.
I think,
Mm,
I mean, my thinking is I know when we've worked together on holidays, there's certain things we take into consideration, isn't there?
mm.
Thinking about looking around the property. So certainly I know we look at steps, whether there's ensuite bathrooms, whether it's a bath or a shower, those kind of things can make a
Yeah.
big difference. And looking at the position of somewhere, are you in a town so you can just step outside the front door and get to where you need to be, or do you want to be a bit further out? There's so many different considerations, but I've
Mm,
not heard of a list of dementia friendly accommodation. But I
mm.
do know we've been working in the tourist industry for a very long time. People like Admiral nurses are, aware of what we do. And actually, the other side of my role is supporting my colleague to make their organisations more dementia friendly. So,
Mm,
we hope that people start to have an increased understanding of dementia. But there's definitely things to look out for, isn't there, when looking at
mm.
accommodation if you're not coming through us. What would your
Yeah,
top three
definitely.
be?
I would say so things like accessibility needs, so if someone has mobility challenges, is the accommodation all on one level? Are there lifts? If people might need things like rails in the bathroom to support with kind of washing. So yeah, number one is accessibility. I think number two is safety. If there are issues at all with things like maybe going on unplanned adventures, particularly at night, how secure is the property?
Mm.
Can you do you have locks on your doors? Kind of might you need to bring along some kind of, I don't know, door alarms, safety equipment, that might kind of keep the person living with dementia safe and prevent them from kind of going missing. I would say as well, things like with dietary needs, that's quite important. And just locally how you might source what you need to kind of meet those dietary needs is also something that's quite key and quite important. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, I mean, I know continence can be a huge problem for people and
Yes.
it can be really off-putting thinking, oh, I can't go away now. But actually, there is products on the market where we can take mattress protectors. So you can, take those before you go away. You can buy door alarms. So,
Mm,
it doesn't stop somebody from maybe trying to take that unplanned adventure, but it makes you aware that they are trying to do that. So there's lots of things we can do to mitigate some of those risk
yes.
factors. And I think, being
Definitely.
perfectly honest, from an adventure leader's point of view, just seeing the benefits of getting away, having a change, even just a change of scenery can be absolutely
Mm,
huge. I think one that springs to mind is an amazing lady I took away, and she really was quite agitated, quite stressed by the idea of being away with us. And actually, with her, we just took it almost minute by minute when we first went away. This is what we're going to do. And, you see that door over there. We're just going to go to that door. And then what? And we'd have those conversations. Well, then we're going to have a cup of tea and a bit of cake in that cafe. And we just have a little bit of time thinking about that, letting
yeah.
her, maybe look at what that looked like so she could process, actually, is that busy? Is there a lot of people there? What does this mean for me? And then as the week progressed, we could see that confidence build because actually, when we start to go away and, experience those different activities or, things that we're doing, it does enable all of us, doesn't it? We all
Mm,
feel a little bit more confident that actually we can do this. This is
yeah,
okay. But
definitely.
do you think there's anywhere online, or would you be able to provide people with advice about planning holidays? Where's your go-to when you're thinking, actually, right, I need to start this holiday. What do I need to do?
Well, I suppose with us, particularly if people are interested in coming away with us, I would say pick up the phone is number one. It's really, really important, I think, to if you're planning on going somewhere, you want to use a particular accommodation or you want to visit certain places on your itinerary, picking up the phone and seeing how your needs and the needs of the person living with dementia can be met. Making
Mhm.
people aware, at accommodations and at venues about what those needs are, so that you are sure that those kind of needs can be met really. So absolutely, it's that kind of communication and that planning are absolutely essential. Yeah.
Definitely. And do you know what? I'd add to that, don't be afraid to get friends and family on board either. Get them to
Yeah.
help you with the planning. If you are supporting somebody 24/7, you've got a lot on your plate already. But actually, by saying to sort of friends and family members, do you know what? I'm thinking of going here. Could you have a look? Could you see if you can get like print off any leaflets or get any literature for me that will tell me what's going to be there? It just
Mm.
lightens that load a little bit, doesn't it?
Definitely, definitely. And I think, yeah, there's a lot to be said for kind of that forward planning and just having those materials that the person living with dementia can access ahead. So, things like a visual guide, photos of where they're going and stuff like that can be really, really helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Karen, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. It's been really interesting. And I think, we are all very passionate about the benefits of just getting out and, getting away and having that break here at Dementia Adventure. But I hope that it's enabled some of you out there to feel that that's also accessible for you as well. If you have left any comments or questions in the chat and we've not had the chance to respond to those, we will do as soon as we can. And just a little heads up about next month's Unpacking Dementia. It's all about community inclusion, and we've got an incredibly special guest line up. Now, I'm not saying that Karen isn't special. Karen is exceedingly special, and I've loved having you with me. But next week we will be joined by Scott Mitchell, who is the husband of the late Dame Barbara Windsor. So he'll be coming to join us along with somebody from a carers organisation, just to really highlight actually what inclusion, what being a part of that community means and looks like. So we'll be unpicking that. So do come along to that. We're really looking forward to welcoming him and you all back to that conversation. So it's really for me to say, Karen, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with? Any holidays that you can recommend?
Yeah, just to say, basically, just because a person is living with dementia, it doesn't mean that holidays are a thing of the past. They're absolutely not, and kind of we say here at Dementia Adventure that with the right support that anything is possible, as long as you put in the right kind of planning, you find ways to integrate those little aspects of routine that are really important, bearing in mind things like emotional anchors. Then you can just have an amazingly joyful time, where you really can connect with each other and with others, in a way that is quite powerful and transformative. Yeah, so if you are interested in kind of finding out more, please do get in touch with us at Dementia Adventure, and we'd love to have a chat with you. We've got spaces on some of our fantastic holidays coming up. There's availability in the Isle of Wight, which is a really great holiday. We've got availability in Norfolk. So yeah, just get in touch.
Couldn't agree with you more. That's been brilliant. Thank you so much. See you again soon.